You are now tuned into the 2-Minute Warning, a live stream community conversation pertaining to social and political issues and how we can collectively resolve them. Powered by the Westside Gazette.
Hello and welcome to the 2-Minute Warning, powered by the Westside Gazette newspaper, Broward County's oldest African-American family-owned newspaper. My name is Perry Busby. I am your host, and joining me at the co-hosting table is my good friend, the publisher of the Westside Gazette newspaper, Mr. Bobby Henry. Bobby, how you doing, my brother?
Good evening, my brother. And Perry, it is such a delight to see you, man. We don't get a chance to see each other until on Thursday nights.
Usually, yeah.
And other than that, man, I'm terrific and getting better. I'm just enjoying all of this stuff as it what's the term? Evolve?
Evolve.
Yeah.
We are evolving.
Oh
sure.
Man, yes we are. Yes we are. So, but I'm glad, man. I'm happy to be here. I'm missing my sidekick, David, who's on a sabbatical.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to the show tonight.
David,
too.
right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're on it. So what's happening, man? Excuse me.
Man, we in this time where 24 hours seems like a year.
Mm-hmm.
And every day we wake up to something new that's happening. I am reminded of the scripture that says, when the foundations are destroyed, what shall the righteous do?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are in a foundation destroying and, as some would say, new world order erecting time. So, man, this is we've had quite a few events. We almost need 2-minute warning shows every day to keep up.
Every day, I was looking at the Westside Gazette, and some of the articles in there, man, are mind baffling, man. Trump trade warheads, Black America hardest. We're affected by this tariff thing. He's doing, he's just wreaking havoc. And here in the publishing business, as he assigned those tariffs to Canada, that hurts us on the print side. So, man, this thing it's going to cause a whole hell of a lot of trouble for a lot of us. I don't mean to just be stammering, man, but the firing of the EEOC firings, just everything is disarrayed, if you will.
Yeah, it's man, like I say, I think what Trump has been a master at is always keeping the press chasing after some red laser and they the cat. And but the thing is, we always said he was the master of the 3-card Monty.
Yes, sir.
So you have to understand some of this stuff is just some smoke bombs going up with no intention. But we need to be vigilant about what they're really doing, because I just kind of think that they're really doing some of this. And so when what they really attempt to do comes, the people are too tired to fight.
Oh yeah, man. Now, I guess one of the other things is, damn. So we caused the plane crash. Man, how asinine can you be, and how hurtful on either side? So yeah,
right. But Bobby, the ones that it's not so much Trump, it's the other participants at this party that they're more watching than anything, and especially who we call these titans of industry, how they have begun to cave in and begin to, and while we focus on those that aren't, there are some companies that are stepping up to say no. Diversity and equity and inclusion has been at the backbone of our success. And so, again, I'm concerned about these CEOs, and maybe they are concerned because they just figure that people just need to work. But this is messing with your bottom line, man.
Oh man, absolutely, absolutely. And this we're having a special call meeting tomorrow. We being the NNPA, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and Black journalists from around the country. So see how we can address this issue from a united standpoint. We can easily be picked off one by one, but if we have a consensus and a collective front, I think it'd be that much more difficult. But we have to understand what we're doing. We just can't jump out there and say, let's boycott this without totally analyzing or coming up with a strategic plan to move in that direction if necessary, not just talk about it. Yeah.
And I do want to tease this because I do want to talk about it later with our guests, though. But one of the ways I really think, Bobby, as we look at this, is if we sort of step back from disengaging in everything that Trump does and use each event as an opportunity to restructure something for our own behalf, that's better. I mean, again, we both come from a time where our community supported us. We weren't looking for outside help. We wanted the equity, but it wasn't as though we wanted to sacrifice what we had in order to get it, even though that is what we've done. And I think what Trump is at least when we look at these, we should at least say, well, what can we do as a community to repair the breaches? Since what we were dependent on is breaking down, what can we do for ourselves now? And I think that if we kind of look at that and begin to take those approaches, because we are doing those things. When Trump announced the tariff in Mexico, I put a post, man. I was writing the list. I'm at less than an hour from the Mexico border. I see my neighbors go to Mexico on the weekend and buy their produce and buy their goods. Some of the businesses go there because Mexico is one of the leading producers of tires. I started making a list and saying, man, let me just go across the border and get it myself. I don't have to pay the tariff. I'm like, let me do James Brown.
Okay.
You know, I don't need you to open the door.
I get it myself. Yeah, yes, sir.
Right.
Yes,
and
sir.
I began to have some people say, well, put this on the list for me. And it made me think, man, that was a time where we did for ourselves. And like our Hispanic brothers are doing, when they go across the shop, they're not going to shop for themselves. They're going to shop for the community, they family. And so maybe we need to start thinking about some of those.
That's cool. You're absolutely right. Let's do this. I see we have our sports person, Coach, back there. Coach Rob, can you hear us? Okay, let's bring him on. Bring him on. Okay. All right, Coach, what's happening?
Coach,
hey, everything's fine. Hey, there's a lot going on in sports. When I was listening to your opening, and I cringe at some of the things that are going on. But and I know people are going on about their lives, and I guess they're trying to get away from the seriousness of what's happening. But it's hard to get away from it. You can't do it, even in sports. With the Super Bowl coming up and everything. But it's still hard to fathom what's going on. But anyway, I guess everybody's talking about the blockbuster trade in basketball between the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm sure you've heard of that. But Luka Doncic is a 25-year-old phenomenal basketball player who was traded from Dallas to LA for Anthony Davis, who led the Los Angeles Lakers to a title in 20. So those were two outstanding players who were traded for each other, and it caught everybody by surprise. And they even said that LeBron James was not aware that this trade was going to happen. The strange thing is that the hierarchy at Dallas, Nico Harrison is a he's a black man along with the coach. And they made this deal, and they've gotten a lot of backlash from the community, especially the white community, because Doncic, they didn't think that would happen. I'll just be quickly, but for two reasons. LA is looking toward the future, and Dallas thinks they have an opportunity to at least compete for a championship now. But here's the issue. I think Dallas also traded Doncic because he has in the past been saddled with conditioning problems. He's not always in the best condition, and also injuries. So I think they were looking to get rid of that baggage instead of paying him all that money they would have to pay him. And Jimmy Butler, with the Heat, that saga has been resolved. And I think everybody is taking a sigh of relief because he's wanted out and he wanted to go to Phoenix, but that didn't work out. So he did sign a contract with the Golden State Warriors. The Heat in return got a first-round draft pick in 25 and 3 players, including Andrew Higgins from Golden State and PJ what's his name? PJ, I can't think his last, Tucker, who was an excellent player at 39. His best days are behind him. And the other trade in basketball was De'Aaron Fox from the Sacramento Kings to the San Antonio Spurs. And the one thing about the Spurs, they've got probably the most phenomenal basketball player we've ever seen since Lou Alcindor. This kid is 7'4". And has vast guard skills, can shoot from the outside and inside. Wembanyama. So I expect San Antonio to be competing for championships in the next few years. And lastly, there's a trend of NFL players becoming head coaches with HBCUs. And the most recent to do that was Terrell Buckley, the former Florida State star, an NFL star who is going to be the head coach at Mississippi Valley, and it'll be in Jerry Rice's old school. So I know you all have a lot to talk about, and I'll just I'm done with that. So I hope you have a great show, and I know Alcee is very proud of Ms. Cherfilus for the jobs she's doing as Congressman. Y'all have a great show.
Okay, thank you very much, Coach. Yeah, and we really appreciate that, Noonie, for you understanding this. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so without any further ado, I want to bring on our next guest, Congresswoman Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick. She's the first Black woman to represent Florida's 20th congressional district, and that's Congressman Alcee Hastings, OC. She was reelected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2024 to serve in her 3rd term, so she knows exactly what she's doing. So I won't say any more, but let's bring the Congresswoman on. Thank you. Thank you so very much, Congresswoman, for joining us tonight. And I, before we move, I want to tell you this and tell our listeners and viewers, your show before you came on our show, you did a teletown conference yourself. And I listened to that entire conference. I was so enamored and amazed at the information that was given. I think it's information that we all can use. And I know that your main audience was geared for our immigrant brothers and sisters. But I learned something too that took me back to when we're dealing with the police. So I want to say thank you so very much for that, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's not every day that we're dealing with so much confusion and chaos. So being able to really talk to the community, outline what's going on, and making the parallels, because it may seem like this is an immigrant issue, but it's really not. It may seem like it doesn't connect to our families and our communities. But when ICE comes in to do a raid, they're trying to get anybody who has an accent. If they don't like you, they're pulling all kinds of people. We even heard reports of them pulling people and sending them back to Puerto Rico. And I say that in quotes because that's America. Like, where are you going with this, right? Or some people who they thought had accents. And really, the police or ICE is really being emboldened to go out there and do whatever they want. So it's kind of like, get everybody you want now, ask questions later. Even the laws we see coming out are doing that. And unfortunately, our community has seen when you have an emboldened enforcement agency, what they really do. They take out their abuses. So making sure everybody knows what their rights are, what they're entitled to. And a lot of people who are even in the school districts, they need to know what they can do and what they can't do. Anybody who's a supervisor anywhere, we need to all be aware and astute to what's going on in this moment.
Absolutely. Now, in particular, I think that MUSKty is on the tip of everybody's tongue.
Yes.
Share with us the danger in what he has done, or what he's allowed to at least attempt to do with this Treasury thing.
Right. So what's really interesting and what's dangerous about what he's doing, he basically is going into every department and blocking other people or people who are working from having access, taking over their entire systems, and being able to pause all funding. Now, why is it so important of Treasury? Treasury actually has all of our financial information. So anybody who's getting a Social Security check, anybody who's getting any money, your taxes, all your information is sitting in Treasury. Now, where do the privacy concerns step in? He has probably a group of 6 people who are working with him. They're all under the age of 25, from 19 to, I think there's a 19, 21, 22, just young people who really have not been properly vetted, who we recently found out posted racist slurs, who got fired today. And they haven't gone through the proper protocols. Usually what we do before you can go work for the federal government, you have to be conflicted out, right? Which means you can't own a business that competes with other businesses, and information is being provided. So now you have Elon Musk, who's on X, Elon Musk, who owns all these entities, and now he has access to looking at his competitors' taxes, his competitors' finances, who's getting money, who has a contract, how much. This is someone who's competing with other people, right, and other business. But more, if he wants to target you and create algorithms, now he knows how much you're spending. He knows your taxes. He knows how much money you're getting from the federal government. He knows all of your business. So if he wants to do an algorithm to target you or your family, he has access to it. And he's never been conflicted out. There's nothing that's been signed that said he can't use this information. And that's really where the biggest concern is. You have just anybody coming in and who is working on these systems and has full access to your private information. Even more, what we've been noticing, and we've been seeing this, is that the number one thing that's the most valuable for everybody in this whole world is your private information. Selling of private information is something that we're seeing more of. And we honestly have no safeguards. And so that's what becomes very concerning. And this week, I think our phones run off the hook because of that. Now, what have we been doing in Congress? There are two folds at how we're fighting this fight. We are actually working with other organizations to file the lawsuits. The reason we have to go through other organizations is because members of Congress do not have standing to actually engage in the lawsuit, which means I can't come in and sue. So what we have to do is work with organizations who do have standing, who are being affected, and come in and sue them and to pause them right there in their tracks. We've been successful with some of it. We're still pushing the lawsuits so we can get them out of Treasury. But my real fear is that they already have so much information on people in their background that they could start selling and changing and moving that information right now as we speak.
Perry, that's your thing. You've always talked about the importance of data.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Congresswoman, I guess the question I want to kind of draw us to is our response.
Yep.
Because it seems as though lately our response has been sort of like at the circus going, wow, ooh, look, I didn't know. Unprecedented is now being used an unprecedented amount of times. So now that we're in unprecedented times, I know the first thing is to do as you're doing now, and that is to get out and talk to the people and begin to help level this out. But what do you say when, as you just pointed out, all of those things, which are true, to a group of, to citizens who are so cynical now, who think oh, well, that's always been happening. Because that's the counter narrative that is also taking place, that, oh, wow, Democrats are trying to make a big deal out of this. This has always been going on.
Well, I'm happy you bring that up because, you know, we all were in this and we were fighting to make sure we had the right person in place. And I think half of us, when we see what's going on, we're kind of like, well, y'all were messing around and now y'all finding out, right? And the other half are sitting there like, you know, how did we get this far? So I understand how some people may be critical and cynical, but the truth is, no, this has never been done before, and it is not legal. It is not legal, and we have to be very clear about that. When we understand the game that's being played against us, we know how to respond to it, right? So what we have right now is the president is doing all these things that are unprecedented. He's aware of it. What he wants to do is make this huge announcement, tell you guys, hey, I'm doing what's never been done before, but there's never the follow-up when he says, oh, my bad, you know, we got blocked. We're not following through with this. It's continuously to shock people. So what we're doing is being very strategic. I don't have time to get out there and be yelling on TV, even though we have some people who are doing that for us when we're actually doing the blocking, right? It's everybody's on the team doing something. So we're doing the blocking, we're trying to protect, and so we're covering it to stop him. Once we've stopped him, we're also going to the community and protecting the community. And so that's why we've been very strategic of how we're moving, especially for my district that is being affected by immigration. So we need to protect everyone, educate them, and not play into what Trump is looking for. Trump is looking for us to chase his story. And what we're doing is like, no. We can see past this. This is the truth. The truth is this is illegal. But also, I always like warn people when we're talking about what's going on. What we got to understand is that everybody has their power. When I say body, you have every branch. So we have the judicial, which is the courts. They have their authority. We have legislation. We have our authority. And the executive branch has authority. Those pieces, we're all equal in this. And we're not victims, right? We have our legislative authority. We have our constitutional mandate. We have the Constitution behind us. And we're going to fight to make sure that we are flexing our muscles to stop you and flexing our muscles to redirect everyone into the right direction. So a lot of the work we're doing is there. So what I would tell people who are skeptical and saying that this always happens, it has never happened, especially to where it has been government authorized. That's the big difference.
Well, can I say what has happened from an IT perspective, and I think from a very common sense perspective, we all who've worked in some capacity, whether government or corporate America, all know what it's like to get onboarded. That you just can't bring in your computer and just start going into a system. There's many protocols in terms of access, and so, you know, when I begin to hear this story, the first thing I say is, well, okay, well, I can understand the bombarding, but the access is another issue because that had to go through either some channels. And if it didn't go through channels, then they hacked in, which is even a bigger issue and which makes this even more criminal. And so I understand that we're getting caught up in this, but my thing is just the process itself in terms of how how things are operating, because these guys should not have access. So has Musk even overtaken that? Because that's an even bigger issue than what we're seeing on the surface.
Absolutely. So I think you asked a perfect question. How is this being implemented? Implementation, it looks pretty much like this. When it came to the USAID, they said as of Saturday, they could not get into their computers to work. So you have government employees who are trying to access, no access as of Saturday. They were completely taken over. No one had got a letter saying, hey, Doge has taken over your computer systems. You can't log in. Everybody's just figuring out, why can't I log in? I lost access. Monday morning, they get an email saying, don't come to work. We're shutting this thing down. You have no access. Whatever you're working on, no access. Then we get a call because we're trying to come into USAID, and they said you cannot come into USAID. So they shut it down. No protocol, no procedure, no warning, no explanations, completely shut it down. Everybody's terrified. No one knows what's going on. Then we get another email and we get a call saying, hey, they're planning to go to the Department of Education. Yesterday, we got a call saying they're going to be hitting the Labor Department by 4 o'clock today, the EPA. So it's a constant firing, no heads up. We're taking over the entire department and we're freezing everything. And that is one of the biggest problems, right? Where you are now choosing to incite fear, chaos, mayhem, and everybody doesn't know where they're going to fall. That's one big piece of it. There's another part that I really, really want to address too that has been impacting our community. And I think it's less talked about, which is the diversity, equity, inclusion portion of it. So they're trying to force people to quit, resign, or take a deal. But within that, they have tried to target diversity, equity, inclusion. Now, for you to be targeted for diversity, equity, inclusion, what we've seen as the common denominator is that A, you are Black, B, you're a woman, or you might fall into the LGBTQ area, right? But more often than not, the calls that I have been getting have been people who are Black, and the assumption is because you are Black that you don't have the merit to be there. You are there only because you are Black, and you are somehow participating in diversity, equity, inclusion, be it on its face, or they said even if they were covertly, like, so if you suspect your colleague was only hired because they're Black, here, tell us that and we'll take care of them. And we've noticed that. Another thing that's been happening too, our Fulbright scholars, the scholarships that are offered by the government, they have been being pulled back from our children. And when we want to look like who are they pulling it back from, the number one thing that we found after these kids were recommended by their colleges and they're at the top of their class, they were Black students, got theirs pulled back. No explanation, said, do not call us, we're pulling it back. So that's when we're really seeing the impact on our community. And a lot of times when I'm talking to people and I tell them about, our federal workers, they're like, well, who are these federal workers? And I said, well, TSA, anybody who's working for our VA clinics, anybody who's working for the hospital, so many different people actually are federal workers. And as they're rolling through these different departments, it is impacting us. And in the bigger part of it, it's really going to impact our economic mobility, because when you're stripping us from scholarship opportunities, knowing that we have a history of not having access to financial wealth, not having access to education, and now you're automatically stripping us because of the color of our skin, when you are now saying that any schools that participate in any kind of equality are now going to be stripped of finances and going to be put on watch and even prosecuted, when you are saying that even jobs, any Black person who's holding a job, the assumption is you got that job because you were Black and we're going to take that from you, that totally decimates our ability to actually move through financially and get jobs. So that is the biggest implication. And we're talking about this on a public level, where we're talking about federal government. But when you look at the flip side, the private sector is now mirroring what we see happening on the public sector. So if we have private and public, where now we have to go say, we're going to stand with Costco because Costco is not going to turn its back on its Black employees. I mean, this is where we see real encroachment on all the advancements that we have had as a Black community, and it's government sanctioned. This is the problem.
As I listened, I'm thinking about how do we comfort those our senior citizens, or those who are not as educated in that realm, Perry, that technical realm. How do we comfort them when they're so worried about losing Social Security, or their little bit of money is being taken because this man has gained access? How do we do that?
I think that's a good question. I think that's one that Congresswoman, I think that's what you guys are trying to figure out at this moment, because that is a serious problem. And Congresswoman, I also want to ask this. I mean, there's been this buyout plan, not endorsed by Congress, who holds the purse strings,
right?
By the way, what do you think is the likelihood that those who take this buyout may not get the buy after they out?
Yeah, I like that. I think there's a strong possibility. This buyout plan that he is banking on is one on its face that looks very illegal. He's going to be testing the limits to see if he can actually do it. There's no clear authorization that says that. What they're banking on is when this gets to the courts, that they have the favor of the courts, and the courts will expand it, which will give them the likelihood to be able to do it. But how does that translate to, people of working, right? It translates like this. He's promising you this money, but you best believe this is going to court. So if you're waiting on that check to come to you tomorrow or the day after, I don't know if it's coming, because it's going to be caught up in court. That's just it. Like, it's unprecedented. It's not clear. There's not a clear check that's going to come to you, right? And if you do start getting paid, it's going to be cut off at some point, because we will pause it by going to court. What we've been trying to tell people to do is you want to hold on to your job, because there are federal protections that protect federal workers, right? So you want to talk to an attorney, see where you are, because we've gotten calls for some people who said, I was going to retire anyhow, right? That's someone who's in a different situation. But if this job is your livelihood and you depended on it, that's something that we need to be cognizant of. Another thing that we're dealing with when it comes to especially people who are in these roles they're calling DEI. Now, before they had these initiatives for diversity, equity, and inclusion, we had highly skilled people working who were recruited from their positions to come into these positions for diversity, equity, inclusion. Some of these people could have had their jobs for 20 years, 25 years. The top level who were asked to now switch over to this. That person is now being fired. And the idea is, you don't deserve to be here. You shouldn't be here. They're not looking at their previous work. They're not looking at, well, maybe I came onto this position 6 months ago, a year ago, but I could have been at this higher level. So there's a lot of different standards and matrices. What I've been doing and pushing back is, I told the administration, I said, all right, let's say we go with your assumption. Your assumption is that everybody who's here, DEI means that they didn't merit it. Okay, let's go with that. What is the standard you want to put in place? Is that standard how much education that person has? Is that standard how well they've worked? Give me the standard, and I bet you that the minority, the Black person you're trying to getting out of that position, can actually fill that standard. And the reason why is because when we look at these positions, we find often that Black people are the most educated in these positions, because we don't get these positions easily. When we look at how long they've been on the job, we realize that we actually been on the job longer than anybody else, because we don't get promotions. When you look at to see who's the best performer, usually it's us, because we have to outperform. So if you're telling me that it's meritless, what is the merit system? And I guarantee you that we can beat that or even match it.
Congresswoman, I want to go to some of our viewers. As a matter of fact, let's see, Miss Victoria Olson. She just, to your point you made earlier, Miss Olson says African Americans actually have to work harder to get key jobs over whites. So they are so full of BS that they got their jobs because they are African Americans. The other point I wanted to make came from Yolanda Bell. She asked the question, and her question says, what about public health, nonprofits working in and for marginalized communities who are being targeted, i.e. LGBTQIA, the unhoused, etc.? And then one other comment came, and that was from Jack D. And she said, this is just a statement. She said, my father works for FAA. He received his resignation letter from OMB. Yeah. So our viewers are keying in. So,
well, thank you. I'm so happy that Yolanda brought that up, because that's been a big issue that we've been fighting about. And we actually had a roundtable with some of our electeds talking about this, the grant funding. So they're trying to freeze the grant funding that we as Congress appropriated in our district based off of need. This grant funding they're trying to freeze are funding that every community needs. What makes us vulnerable? What makes us vulnerable is that they're trying to quantify some of these projects as DEI projects that are specific for housing for disadvantaged people, especially if they're in Black communities. That's my district. So they're trying to say those projects should be frozen, and we're going to look at them because they're not, it's discriminatory towards white people, which isn't true. Some of the language that we're seeing with the organizations that have built up our communities, such as the NAACP, are they going to be able to get the funding that we have appropriated as Congress? And one of the things that you pointed out earlier is that Congress has the constitutional power of the purse, which means that when we say we're going to spend, we have the right. No one could undo that spending. And so what he's actually doing is an impoundment, which means the executive branch is trying to come in and cut off our spending or tell us how to spend. He's aware. They are aware that they're going to go to court for this. They are aware what's going to happen. But once again, they're testing the limits. How does that impact us? There's a lot of great people doing a lot of great work who stop getting money. And so how can they continue building the housing projects that I funded if the money has been stopped? Today, I heard from an organization. It's called it's Focal Group. And they were telling me, Found Care. It was Found Care who came in today, and they do a lot of the work in the community. We gave them a grant, and they said that right now that it is extremely difficult for them, and they're very scared. They also told me about the impact they had when Medicaid was frozen for that day. As you remember, when they announced the freezing, Medicaid was actually frozen for the day. And when everybody talked about the outrage, and they were like, there are babies who now are not getting what they need, that's when they unfroze it, and they said, oh, my bad. We didn't mean to do that. We were just kidding. So what we're realizing, the lessons learned, is that when we start hammering them, when we start, pushing the community to have public outrage, when we start fighting back, they do roll back, or we are able to block and defend it in court.
Mm-hmm.
Congresswoman, I would like to target in on that, because while there have been court victories, such as the one you mentioned, we are also finding out that victory does not mean back to the original state, because we're still seeing Head Start programs who still do not have access to some of their to the website in order to draw down on their funds, as well as some other entities. And so that leads me to that other point that, how do we ensure people that what is announced as a victory is really felt as a victory? Because it, that adds to the chaos as well, because people are hearing, okay, things are back, and experiencing another, and now they don't know where to go, because who can now fix a problem that is, that is now acting at free will,
right?
So to say.
So I'm happy you asked that question, because these are temporary injunctions and blocking until we could actually get a permanent solution, right? So for now, we have circumvented the immediate effects. So we've paused it, and we're still going through the motion. What we see right now, and I know we've said unprecedented so many different times, but we are in a place where the way we do business is being tested. Not only the way we do business is being tested as the government, but the reason behind why we do what we do and what we believe in is being tested, right? And so we're going to have to now step in and not just reaffirm that this is important for every single person, but we're going to have to make sure that we're holding everyone's foot to the fire, right? Because the president can say one thing, but every representative in Congress has to get up and vote on it and tell their constituents, hey, I don't think you should have Head Start. Hey, I think Title I, I think we should just roll that back. And at the end of the day, we know the people who will benefit most of these programs are not Black people. The people who are benefiting the most from diversity, equity, and inclusion are white women. When we look at how many people need school lunches, they're white people. So they're going to have to stand up and tell their people, I'm voting against your interest. And I think that's when we're going to start actually seeing change, because I don't think they'll do it.
Okay, two other points. I'm going to go back to our viewers. And again, yeah, D&I means more than just Black folk. Let's go to Meredith McCleary, another HBCU graduate. It just happened to be Tuskegee. And we got an HU person on the screen. Okay, she says, Social Security is my money. What strategy to stop the madness? That's one. I want to go down to, that's one question. Let's go down to Monique Delin. Am I pronouncing it right? And Monique asks, she said, how do we track credible District 20 ICE raids to avoid impersonation and creating fear in the community? Those are two questions.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take the first question. Let's do the last one. So ICE, when ICE comes to your door, they have to give you an actual search warrant. the fear that we're seeing in census, that's intentional. They're intentionally trying to create that fear, that intimidation to drive immigrants out before they get there. So I don't think there's any way for us to avoid the fear, but to educate ourselves so we know what's going on. But you have to make sure if they do present themselves that they actually have a warrant and they're actually looking for a specific person. They cannot come in and say, hey, we want to go into your school and find everybody. They can't come up to you and be like, well, what is your status? They can't do that. They have to have those paperwork. And if they do take you because they're overzealous, we recommend not saying anything but asking for your lawyer so they can actually be there to defend you. So I think we're just in a moment where we have to educate and strengthen.
The other question was from Meredith McCleary in reference to Social Security. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Social Security, number one thing that we have said is off limits. We are not playing, don't touch the Social Security, don't touch that money. It seems like as we're adding that pressure and telling them not to touch it, they haven't actually started going towards Social Security. So I think we did a really good job fighting on that. Like that is non-negotiable. And also when they touched the Medicaid, we actually got them to back off of that. So Social Security right now, they haven't introduced a bill to get rid of it. And we have fought back that. So we haven't seen any real indications just yet that they're going to touch Social Security. But however, Project 2022-25 does describe how they want to change Social Security. And we're introducing bills to combat that.
Yeah.
Trying to
go ahead, Bob.
Okay, trying to bring a parallel to communities who are doing something and maybe give us some hope. Is that Arthea? Arthea Wimberly says, Aretha, thank you. Our community needs the kind of organization happening in Cali and the lawsuits filed on behalf of pregnant, undocumented mothers and the fury sparked by the intent to take over Gaza. Where is the equal level of response about the threats to Black children and their future? We boycotting Target and still shopping with other corporations who have always been anti-DEI.
Absolutely. I think there's so many words. I don't even know where to start. The outrage is present 110%. We are fighting and working with every organization we can. One of the issues that we're having also is that they gave us a new congressional schedule. This congressional schedule has us in DC more than we've ever had, which is strategic. They want to keep us here so we can't be in district to organize. But we have great organizations who are organizing. We're doing the town halls. We're pulling people together. And on top of that, we are absolutely holding every single so-called ally accountable. Don't call me and ask me to fight next to you if you're not standing next to me, understanding that this so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion fight is going to destroy our economic mobility. Don't call me and ask me to talk about how they're trying to invade you if you're not going to stand with us and our community also. And we've made this very clear. I've made it very clear to everybody. If you can't stand and fight with me, don't call me to fight with you. Don't call my community. Don't even come. Don't show up over here in Sis Trunk when you are ready because you need. No, I'm real talk, right? Because we have to have time. We have to say that we're not moving as a community until you actually stand with us first. You shouldn't even wait for a call from me to say, hey, they're attacking me. Where are you on this? And I've been saying that over and over again. I'm tired of listening to other members come and talk about their issue when you're right next to me and you can't acknowledge how they are trying to destroy us financially. You are right here. You can show up all the time in my community, but when did you get up and talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what it's doing to us? So we have to have a real no-nonsense policy. And you won't see me standing with nobody who's not standing with us. And that's just how it's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Perry, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, and that was, I mean, we've seen them talk about the drawing down and drawing back of programs. At the foundation of that is the money that's allocated toward those programs. So where is this reallocation? I mean, we haven't even touched on Department of Education. I saw Wesley Boyd saying, what about that? Because that's next. At the foundation of this is the money. Mm-hmm. And as they say, you have to follow the money. So if they taking this from here, what are we seeing that they are trying to reallocate in order to do? I mean, other than this talk about a Riviera in the Middle East.
So,
I mean, what have we tried? What seems to be their intent?
to enrich themselves. I mean, they haven't given us and told us explicitly what they're doing, but look at the divide and conquer of the narrative they're putting out. When they said they're going to stop funding, one of the things when they went into the DOD, they said the DOD was spending X amount of money on sushi, right? And so I had people calling me being like, oh, did you hear how wasteful the government is? They're spending X amount of money on sushi. I said, do you understand that the DOD is all of our military personnel? Do you know when you have all of our different military personnel and they have to be fed, what do you think we should feed our soldiers who are risking their lives out there? What do you think we should feed them? Mm-hmm. You know, that becomes the question. But what they're telling people is totally different. Then I heard them putting out the storyline that, you know, this U.S. aid is wasting all this money. And then I had to explain to some people, do you understand what we do when we give out aid? I'll give you an example in Haiti. In Haiti, Haiti's on the brink of having a famine. The only reason Haiti does not have a famine is because we had U.S. aid there feeding them. And what the gangs were doing, and the gangs are supported by cartel, they would tell the kids that either you come here and join us or you don't eat and you don't have protection. Those kids would join the gangs, and I saw kids who were smaller than the guns they were holding because they had no other way to go. When we were giving them food, now they weren't joining the gangs. And so we are actually preventing wars, preventing different kinds of catastrophes by actually doing them. And there's one thing that I learned being in foreign affairs, doing this work, it's either you feed them now or you're going to fight them later. If you don't feed them now, there will be somebody who will come in who will corrupt them, and now you're going to fight them. And that's not just internationally, that is in our communities. If we don't make sure that people have jobs and they are eating, we're going to have to figure out how we stop crime, right? If I don't make sure that you have an outlet that is healthy, that actually gives you pride and dignity, I'm going to have to figure out what to do there next. And I can tell you the number one thing they're pushing with all of these bills is to incarcerate and to punish. And who do you think they want to incarcerate and punish?
Us. Okay.
They're already in talks with Australia about a prison.
Yeah.
I heard.
It's like every crazy idea is coming out now. And I looked at it and I said, where are we? We're like in the twilight zone. But you know, we made a determination that if you can have your ideas, well, I could have my ideas too. I have some programs we want to see. We got some bills that are going to be introduced, and don't tell me it's never been done, because what you're doing is not even legal. So you got ideas, I got ideas. We're about to introduce some legislation too.
And that was to my point, Congresswoman. I'm sorry, but that was to my point. To not always have the narrative be about Trump and the GOP. And I think that, again, that's what we learned from from the younger generation who were not used to seeing this dynamic take place.
Yeah.
And so to hear some of the language that elders began to talk seemed to sound kind of foreign and way back, but now we're seeing. But to that point, you were saying you're going to begin to announce legislation to talk about what we can build as opposed to what we're always fighting, because the fight is going to be the fight.
Yep. And we have
So how can we encourage people to look toward building? Because I think that's all, despite what Trump did, he made people envision something that was going to take place, that they were going to take action and make some change. So as opposed to all this fighting or, well, we're going to put up a new bill, we understand the significance of it, but for people who are not politically astute, they're asking, well, what does that do for me? I'm trying to feed my baby.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is that I encourage people to stay away from the whining, right? The whining is, oh, Trump did this today, he did that tomorrow. We are not powerless. You know, we have the power of the purse. We have legislative authority. We have the Constitution on our side. And what that means is, okay, you want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, I'm going to write a merit-based program, and I bet you that merit-based program is going to put us ahead of everybody. right? Because we're going to actually say that this is what the criteria is. And then this criteria, people will meet it and get those jobs. We're going to talk about, okay, let's get more opportunities for people, not just in the United States, but exteriorly. And that's what's going to start changing us being able to feed our families. But I don't want anybody to have this guise of the reality that we're in and what we're moving towards. What he is doing is everything he said he was going to do. What we have to do is, if they're reimagining a world of 2025, we have to now reimagine our world and be able to put ourselves in this world without limits, right? They sat there and they thought of, we're going to go and just take over Gaza. We're going to do this. We're going to, make it equitable for white people, white men, because they feel like they're disadvantaged. Well, we need to write a policy that's actually going to include everybody and puts us at the forefront too. We need to start putting pressure on everyone to make them realize that it's really not a black or a white issue. It's an elitist issue. And what they're trying to do is fill their pockets and put them on top. What we need to do is make sure that everyone stands up. And I hear a lot of younger people who are grumbling and saying that they're upset, they feel this kind of way. And what I keep telling them is that nothing has ever been easy for us. And if you've been fortunate enough and it's been easy for you, well, welcome to the party and wake up. Every generation has to fight. Every generation needs to be included. Everybody has the talent. So whatever space that you're in, you need to join me in that fight. If you are, a basketball player, if you are an artist, if you are a writer, if you are a singer, you should be talking about this and helping us mobilize. We can't do this by ourselves. This is a great work for our generation. And so what I tell older people who feel disadvantaged, I'm like, this is our time to fight. You deserve to actually rest and know assured that everything you taught us is for us to fight in this moment. And so if there's a young person who's feeling disadvantaged, it's because you ain't doing nothing. Join the fight.
Hey, Congresswoman, now you just opened up a can of worms. Now you're gonna draw me right into that with my comments. But I want to go here, excuse me, to what Ms. McCleary is saying as it pertains to the title of the show. She says, "What's the plan to get that MUSKty smell out of the White House, with all of these white folks running around in there?" So
yes, but one of the things that we see is absolutely working, because now they're trying to attack. Anytime we speak Musk on the floor, they're trying to strike our language, right? He is not an elected official, so he is not protected by speech and debate. But now that we're elevating what he's doing, what his intent is, and we're elevating how illegal and people are calling and people are protesting, now they're pulling away from him. So we're going to keep applying the external pressure, but we're also going to keep talking about the illegality of him even being a part of it or in that position. And those two things are how we're going to pull him down. And so even in this week, you see they've slowed themselves down. They haven't fully gone as gung-ho as they were. We already pulled down one of the people who was working with him. We're investigating those people, because those people who are working with him, those young men, they weren't approved by anybody before they got there. And so now that we know who they are, we are looking into their backgrounds. We are removing them. And so the plan is to root every single one of them out, one by one, until they're not there at all. And we're heading down that lane.
Very good. Now, I must remind us that we're at the top of the hour. So, Perry, if you want to, you got a comment, and then we're going to come back to you, Congresswoman, to give your closing remarks, and then I'll close it out. Perry? We can't hear you, Perry.
I'm sorry. I will, as they say, give my time to Victoria Olsen, who I think has something very pertinent to say. Victoria says, keep calling your congressional people and senators. Washington needs your calls so they know you are angry as to what Trump and Musk is doing. The DC switchboard has been jammed, having to call several times to get in, especially Rick Scott and Ashley Moody. And I think that says it all. Yep. We have to make the calls. We have to let our leaders, our elected leaders, feel our pressure. Because if they don't, they're going to do as Washington does. And and that's not a bad thing, but they do need to hear our pain. They do need to understand it. And that's just not the Republicans, it's the Democrats in this. We have to encourage our leaders in their fight. They need to hear from us. They need to hear our encouragement. But if they aren't doing the right thing, they also need to hear our pain. And so I think that that's a valid thing. And I'll leave it at that.
With that, Perry, Congresswoman, if we wanted to encourage you, how can we get in contact with you? You want to put it in the chat, or how do we do this for our viewers?
Out to my office and my website. We're about to put a portal up so we can start organizing and getting more people to tell us what's going on with them, because those personal stories actually let us know who's being impacted. There was no forethought as they were doing it, so we're finding out the ripple effects as time goes on. So anybody who needs to get in contact with me can reach out to my office, and we could put that in the chat so they can make sure that they're staying in contact with us. Like I said, we're going to have that portal. Another thing, when we're talking about what we've been doing, which is important, every time I have a moment, I've been talking to kids who are in high school, even down to 7th grade. And I've been explaining to them how bills become law and how government works, because this is a moment for us all to have all hands on deck. Everybody must join the fight. And so the organizing that we need you to get out and organize. Students, everybody needs to know how things are done, how things are made, and the community needs to stand out in large and organize. This is not a fight that's just for your elected. This is a fight for everyone to stand up and take a stand. And so any organizing that's going on, anything that you want to join us in doing, we would love to be a part of it. And if I could say any final words, it would really be like, this is truly a moment that has never been seen. And everyone who is alive in this moment was destined to effectuate change. And everybody, when you look in that mirror, you need to ask yourself, what role do you play right here and right now? It's only been like, 14 days, maybe even 16 days or something. And it has been a roller coaster. And so if everybody picks up their mantle and we all start fighting together, we can actually not go back to normal, because that's not what we want. We want more. We have a thirsting for change. We have a hunger for change. And this is the moment when change happens. Everything is being shaken up and it's going to have to fall into place, but we got to design what place it's going to fall into. So join the fight, pick up your mantle, and let's change this world to make sure that finally our community has equal access and could be economically mobile, can be politically mobile, and can actually live with dignity.
All right. Thank you so very much. And I want to say thank you to our special guest, our leader, our fighting Congresswoman, Sister Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick. And I'm going to ask the question, what's that musky smell in our government? As we wrap up today's show, one thing is clear. There's a strong musky smell in our government, and it's getting harder to ignore. From data privacy concerns to unchecked power and influence. Elon Musk isn't just playing in the tech world. He's shaping policy, controlling narratives, and cozying up to those who want to roll back progress. And if we're not paying attention, that cost could be our privacy, our democracy, and our voice. The Black press has always been the first line of defense against misinformation and corporate outreach, and that responsibility hasn't changed. So stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, follow the money, question the motives, and keep your nose sharp, because when something doesn't smell right, it usually isn't. That's our time until next time. Stay woke, stay watching. And one other thing, there was a strong, fierce freedom fighter in the name of Dietrich Barnhart back in 1906. I would advise everybody to take a look at what this man was willing to do and did, and he was hung for it, but he fought for his people. And if you're not willing to die for something, then you're not willing to live for anything. God bless you. Stay informed and stay with us. Thank you, Congresswoman.